So, The Hunger Games. If you haven't heard of it by now, you've kind of been living under a rock. It's a gigantic book and movie franchise that's been making a huge amount of money. The book the series was based on was released 10 years ago, back in 2008, by Suzanne Collins, and it ignited a huge inferno of teenagers to talk about how much they absolutely love the book. And the movie series has been even more popular. People think that they're classic films if you listen to the way they talk about them. On YouTube, at least, and, well, I just can't agree. I mean, I understand that I'm outside of the age demographic for these books and these movies, but I just don't think they're very good. I read the first book in the series, granted, just the first one, and a lot of it really kind of bored me. And it bored me because, this story has been done before so many times that it seems ridiculous to be retelling it like this, again and again and again. The Hunger Games is set in a dystopian future, where people are forced by a dictatorial government to compete in gladiatorial combat against other children, and whoever wins gets to escape. Everyone else dies, but the winner gets fame and glory and fortune, and it's used to appease the masses and keep them from worrying about the tyrannical government that's in charge of their lives. And the way you hear people talk about this, especially people that are, 14 or 15 years old sometimes, that they just, in the target age demographic, they talk about it as if it's magnificent and well-written, just an amazing and intelligent experience that gets them thinking about deeper issues. And I guess in a way that's kind of true. I mean, the book for young adult literature is, I suppose, passable. Now, if you're not aware of what young adult literature is, you may be, not a teenager. And it's a gigantic and very lucrative subgenre of writing that attracts a lot of money every year. And if you're not in that age demographic of tweens and teens, you may not even know it exists. There are books designed at a simpler reading level for people that are about between 12 and 18 years old, maybe even younger than 18. And these books are often maybe the first novels that these kids are really cracking into, which is kind of sad, but never mind that. They're sort of written at the middle schooler type level. Sort of a little bit better maybe than the Harry Potter books sometimes, but usually just about like that. When I was reading the book and watching the movie, I just felt that this had all been done so much better, so many times before. Why the heck were they even doing this? Now, the trope of a human being hunted and finding themselves in the role of a prey animal by other humans that are hunting them down is a very old one, and one of the earliest examples of this I know of is The Most Dangerous Game. And it is about a creepy, weird Eastern European guy that lives on an island, and he traps people there, chases them into the jungle, and hunts them down and kills them. Usually there's some sort of weird psychological underpinning to what's going on, like the guy has repressed sexuality, and he can't really have a normal sexual life with his wife, so he sort of takes it out on people by hunting them down and viciously murdering them. And this story has been adapted over and over again on cinema. The Most Dangerous Game, which I have from the 1930s in the Criterion Collection. There was one that MST3K did called Bloodlust, a movie from the 1960s that involved teenagers being trapped on the island. And Naked Prey was another one about a white man in Africa who is stripped naked and forced into the jungle and is chased down by a group of tribesmen. And this idea has just been done again and again and again. And if you're a kid, and this is your first time really reading anything, you may not notice that. So, I gotta forgive them for this. But the age demographic for these books, 12, 13, 14, that's right in the age where they could be reading The Most Dangerous Game or one of these other books. I guess it's okay to adapt it for more modern times, but I guess I'm really just upset about the effusive praise that has been given to these books that I don't think that they really deserve. Now, the human being hunted in the role of a prey animal is such a trope that it barely seems worth mentioning that it exists all over the place. The entire slasher genre, in many ways, was sort of based on that idea. It really began in the 70s and 80s with these new slasher movies, which had an extended, pornographic, almost extreme chase sequence that went on and on and on, where people were being hunted down by people like Leatherface or Jason or Michael Myers. It was even done pretty well in the movie Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1987. We'll be getting back to Schwarzenegger in 1987 in a little bit, though. The movie, the concept was done definitively, I think, in the year 2000 by one of my favorite directors, Kinji Fukasaku, the director of a ton of movies, including the amazing Battles Without Honor and Humanity Yakuza films from the 1970s. He is an amazing director, and he went out, his last movie is of course the delirious masterpiece Battle Royale. And this movie also featured a group of children being left on an island where they were going to be hunted down for sport. They were going to have to kill one another in order to escape some sort of punishment. There was a dictatorial government that was doing it. And the movie is a masterpiece. It is visually beautiful, colorful. It has a very bright and interesting palette. It's exciting. You don't know what the heck's going on or why it's going on. Everyone is very mysterious. The violence is very sudden and absolutely extreme. And more importantly, the movie takes what it's doing not terribly seriously. Nor, crucially, I will mention, should it. The idea is an interesting extrapolation of various things that are going on, which is what fiction, especially science fiction and fantasy, should do. It takes what is current and sort of takes it to a logical extreme to show what's bad about what's realistic now, by showing a ridiculous fantasy version of it. So the movie really should be ridiculous and over the top, and it is, and it's actually quite funny. It's so ludicrous what's going on that they just go along with it and say, this is absolutely absurd, this would never happen, it's totally insane, let's have fun with it. And the movie is perfect. It can be watched many different times. It actually goes pretty deep into the psychology and emotions behind the person doing this, played by the amazing Beat Takeshi Kitano, one of the greatest Japanese actors of all time. He is absolutely incredible in this, and has that perfect ability to slide back and forth as a tough, mean guy, and a surprisingly funny and ridiculous over-the-top guy. He's amazing in this role. The kids are actually really good in the role, and the kids do something I think which makes a little bit more sense, where they try to fight their way out of it. Some of the kids try to hack what's going on and fight back against the adults that are doing this and try to get their way out. And some of the kids are just psychopaths, and some of them are just victims, and it's absolutely amazing. It is a wonderful film, and really should be seen. And if you're 12 or 13, you definitely have the maturity to see Battle Royale. It's very violent, but I would say that you should be able to watch that instead of, being led towards The Hunger Games. Now, you may be saying to yourself, hold on a minute there, Mike. You mentioned a lot of movies here, you mentioned a lot of ideas, you mentioned the skeletal structure of a story about people being hunted as prey, but aren't you forgetting about the politics? Isn't this something that they've done first? Isn't the political aspect that they've thrown in this, somehow makes it different and makes it relevant and forward-thinking and unique and something beyond mere entertainment? The political commentary that it's making. And, well, yeah, I guess it does make it a little bit better than sheer entertainment, but it's certainly not the first time that it's been done. The earliest time that I know of that it's been done, and maybe it's been done before this, I don't know, is actually in 1971 on a German television movie called The Millionaire's Game, or The Millionenspiel, which I've seen show up on YouTube every now and again, so you might want to check that out to see if you can find it on YouTube. And this movie is actually really good and covers pretty much all the same bases. It's about criminals who have the ability to go on television on what amounts to a reality TV show or game show, and use that time there in order to redeem themselves or get a commutation of their sentence while going through all the dangers and hazards of being on the game show. Now, it wasn't quite as over-the-top and ridiculous as it later became, but this had all of the tropes here. Almost 40 years before The Hunger Games, The Millionaire's Game was doing a great job satirizing consumer capitalism. And it wasn't just crucially a criticism of capitalism, but late-stage consumer capitalism that was just taking shape there in the post-war period, where people were encouraged to think of themselves not as citizens with voting powers, but as consumers with money that should be catered to. And they took the ridiculous example of reality television, as it would later be called, to show how vile and barbaric people could become in order to sate this never-ending desire to be entertained. But I think it's great to check this out as really the origin point for wedding this idea of the human as prey and capitalism being criticized in this way. And it's done, I think, a little bit more adult way without the ridiculous teen drama threesome nonsense that's going on. between Katniss and her two boyfriends. Now, this movie was actually remade a decade later as a French film, and it's very much the same. It's pretty much the same story there, so it was done yet again in 1981. That one, I think, was a little bit better than the TV movie, because obviously they had more money because it was a theatrical film, but still, it was the same story done yet again decades before The Hunger Games, and just after that, in 1982, we get what is probably the definitive version of this story in print, which is, of course, The Running Man, which was written by Stephen King under his alias Richard Bachman, and it's a really, really good story. It's dark, it's gritty, it has kind of a cyberpunk feel, even though that term hadn't really been coined yet in 1982. I don't know if it had been coined yet, but Neuromancer by William Gibson hadn't even been released yet, and it was just starting to form as a genre, and he made a contribution to it with this interesting work, and I think that the book is really worth reading. And again, it's right at that age level where if you're 12 or 13, this book is perfect for you. You shouldn't be going to something that's specifically in quote-unquote young adult literature. You should just read this excellent book by Stephen King. It actually takes this story, treats it seriously, and actually has a fairly dark ending and a pretty harsh criticism of American consumerist capitalism. This book was done in just one book, just one story, because guess what? This idea does not merit 4 or 5 or 12 books. Everything nowadays, because of the ludicrous business model we happen to be in right now, involves people making huge franchises, giant series of things. And this isn't just in young adult literature, this is in fantasy fiction and science fiction. Unless you're going to be making a series of 10 books, it seems like people don't have any interest in it. They don't want to take just an idea and make it into a sparse, well-written, economical book of 150 to 200 pages, which is exactly what this story deserves. And I'm not saying that as a slur against the story or that it's bad, I'm just saying that this ain't worth this much pulp. The trees that gave their lives to make these books, the story was not worth it. I'm sorry. You can't draw this out that much. The story was worth one book, period, that's it. Which is why I can't really get into this series, because as interested as I might be in the concepts, it doesn't deserve this type of treatment, and we shouldn't be encouraging people when they're children and just starting to get into reading. They get their hooks in you when you're a teenager and encourage you to think that 4 or 5 books in a series is a good thing. So when you're an adult and reading adult fiction, you're going to think the same thing. And in your science fiction fantasy, you're going to want to have a giant soap opera-esque series with hundreds and hundreds of pages for stories that barely are worth a novella. The Running Man was made into a movie in 1987, and I enjoy it better than The Hunger Games. I like that movie better than The Hunger Games. And you know why? Because it's just one movie. The requisite amount of time that movie needed in order to tell that story. Unlike The Hunger Games, which went on for God knows how long, I've stopped counting, in order to tell one damn story about one little revolution. The movie stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jesse Ventura and Maria Conchita Alonso. I love saying that name, Maria Conchita Alonso. And it was released in 1987, the same year as another Arnold Schwarzenegger action classic, Predator, and also RoboCop. So 1987 was kind of like the golden year for action movies for some reason. The Running Man is just an incredible, incredible experience.
Turns the land into a nature preserve where I will hunt the deadliest game of all, man.
Now, it's not a very good movie, I would have to say. It's definitely a B film. The direction is kind of ridiculous. The look and feel of it is over the top and ludicrous, and in many ways, it does a disservice to King's original novel. Now, Stephen King, as good a writer as he may be, does not know movies that well, and he has actually repeatedly said that films that are good are actually bad, and films that are bad are actually good. I mean, he doesn't like Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, and he likes the television version of it in the mid-90s, so his opinions about movies, even based on his own work, is questionable at best. So take his opinion, even if it is his own work, with a grain of salt, but it's still not quite where the book was. The movie doesn't do a good job of capturing the sort of darkness, the grittiness, the grim ending in which the character actually dies. He kills himself in order to take out the evil signal that the government is sending to broadcast the Running Man. And it could have been done much better. Arnold Schwarzenegger himself said that the director was really the problem with the movie. But I think they're both being very, very unfair to the film. As I said, this story idea is very ridiculous, and I think actually benefits with it being a little bit over the top and a little bit ludicrous. I like it when they go a little bit crazy with this story idea, because that plays up and hams up the idea of how trashy and cheesy reality TV really is, and how slimy all of it really is, and these game show hucksters really are. Arnold is okay in the movie. I mean, he's not terrible, he's still good, but the action quips that he give him are nowhere near where they were in the Terminator or Commando or Predator. They're not really quotable. It's like someone was trying to write them but didn't understand how to do it, and it feels very forced and bad.
Here is Sub-Zero! Now, Plane Zero!
The outfit that he wears as the Running Man is this ridiculous yellow spandex suit. And the people that he fights are these ridiculous, not at all scary, and for some reason frequently overweight fighters that don't really look like they're very scary. And the action sequences are not spectacular when he's going against them, and they feel very cartoonish. But as I said, it's kind of a cartoonish idea. Richard Dawson plays the game show host that's the head of the Running Man, and he is brilliant. He is perfect in this role as this sleazy, slimy asshole who is all smiles in front of the cameras, but is a mean, awful, hideous person behind them. And I think we've all known people like that in our lives. And he's just a joy to see in this film.
On your marks! Get set! Killian, I'll be back.
Only in a rerun.
Go!
The movie gets going much faster than The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games actually take over an hour before The Hunger Games actually begin. This movie, there's already fighting going on within the first 15 minutes when Arnold is trying to break out of the prison camp he's in. And the Running Man game actually starts 40 minutes in, and there's plenty of action, and the pace is amazing. Now let's turn to The Hunger Games, the movie, and why it just didn't work, and why I could not stand it. Number one, why so serious? Why are you so relentlessly, gruelingly serious with what's going on here? You're taking this, you're making it almost maudlin and sad, and everything has this washed out, whitish, this colorless color palette. The movie looks like it's anemic. It looks terrible. I can't stand even watching it. And you're just so dreary. I mean, you're making this like the most serious thing in the world. When, admittedly, the Running Man may have been a little bit too ridiculous, but that was the right direction to go, not too serious. This story doesn't warrant that level of seriousness. It's not a movie about the Bosnian War or something like that. This is just a ridiculous science fiction fantasy movie. Next up, it takes so long to get going. It takes over an hour before the Hunger Games actually begin. Why does it take so long? It just goes on and on and on and on. I couldn't stand it. I was falling asleep when I was trying to watch this. They take so long to set everything up. It doesn't necessarily even do a very good job of skillfully showing this world, because even though some of the sets and costumes of the people in the Capitol could be said to be a little bit creative, I suppose, they're so ludicrous and idiotic looking, I can't help but laugh at them. You make fun of Arnold's costume in The Running Man, but not these costumes in The Hunger Games. Are you kidding me? Also, that staple of young adult fiction, the love triangle between Katniss and the two boys she loves. First off, I barely even knew what the heck was going on. It wasn't until I read the book that I understood what the heck was happening. We barely even spend any time with the guy Gale at the beginning, like a couple of minutes, and it's not until the next movie that we really know anything about him. And why do none of these people seem like they're starving? They all seem to be very much full-bodied adults. They have meat on them bones. I mean, Gale is muscular, for God's sake. What does he hit the gym in his desolate Appalachian shack that he lives in? So after spending an ungodly amount of time getting to know Katniss and her dismal surroundings, we actually finally get moving towards the capital and go through a ridiculously long training and getting to know her sequence where they parade her through the town and she talks to all these people and goes on a talk show. It's ridiculous, and it takes so much freaking time. Instead of doing all this, we should be, I don't know, advancing the plot, maybe getting to the Hunger Games, and maybe, again, am I crazy here? Getting rid of the evil government, which you should be doing in one film, not 3 or 4 or 5 or how many the heck it is. When we finally get into the Hunger Games, Katniss is one of the worst fighters I've ever seen on any action movie. Now, I'm serious about this. She's horrible. She really is like just an average person thrown into this event. I don't know why people think that she's a strong woman or a strong female character. She's not. She's terrible. She barely kills anyone. She runs around and hides most of the time. And when she tries to kill people, usually other people are doing the killing. That guy and his friends, those people are the killers in this game. She's just sort of like hiding out in the background, trying not to get involved. Is that supposed to be a strong female character? She seems like a wimp. What if Sigourney Weaver as Ripley was just like hiding around in the background, hoping that people were going to solve her problems for her? I mean, at least Arnold is getting out there and actually fighting and beating people up and doing things. But Katniss, she seems more worried and afraid most of the time, which I guess realistically speaking is what you would be in that situation. But she's not really all that tough. She barely kills anybody in this movie. It's almost unbearable how serious everything is during this time period, how she makes a friend with someone, and how upset she gets when she dies, how Peeta ridiculously and impossibly covers his face with some sort of paint to allegedly camouflage himself, and it looks so ridiculous I burst out laughing while watching it. And then the mutations. The mutant hounds from Fallout 4 show up and run around and start attacking people towards the end. Really? You think that The Running Man was ridiculous, but this isn't? I couldn't believe that people even took it seriously. Now, admittedly, I've heard from some people, not many, but some people said the first movie wasn't as good as the others, and that later on they got better at it. But don't you think your first foot forward should be something good? Your first foot forward should be something interesting? The bottom line of this gigantic rant that I went on here is that I'm a little bit peeved when I hear people on the internet talk about how much they love the Hunger Games. It's just kind of boring and disinteresting to me, and I think that even though I'm outside of the target demographic, that even people that are like 12, 13, 14, and they want to read one of these stories, they should just get one of the other better written stories, like the original Most Dangerous Game, or if you want politics stewed in there, the Stephen King book. Just read The Running Man. I guess on the outside chance if someone insists on the character being a woman, maybe there is a better one with a female character, I don't know. But I guess you would have to read this one. But really, why waste your time reading 4 books about this character, instead of just reading one book about a better written book? It gets the story across properly in a shorter amount of time. That just seems like a better idea to me. I wish that there was something a little bit better on offer for young adult fiction. I'm worried that young adults are reading these books and turning into people when they're adults that are buying these horribly written fantasy and science fiction books that I generally can't stand, especially ones that are written in gigantic 10-book-long series. They're sort of training teenagers to think that they need a pathetic love story and a ridiculous 10-book-long series instead of one short, sparse, crisp book that you can finish very easily in a week, which is probably, as I said, what you can do with The Running Man and what this story deserves. And cinematically speaking, The Hunger Games was horrible. It looked horrible. It wasn't any fun. It was so dismally serious I can barely stand it. And I would say, watch The Running Man. As silly and ludicrous as it is, it's better than this. And something that you can get the seriousness, the amazing tone, the interesting style, and incredible direction along with an incredible story is Battle Royale. A perfect movie. And I'm not getting into whether she stole the idea. She said she never saw it. That's possible. It's a Japanese movie. She maybe didn't see it. But if someone is getting interested in this stuff, they should be seeing the cream of the crop. They should be seeing the best of the best, like Battle Royale or reading The Running Man or even seeing The Running Man, instead of spending like 5 or 6 hours or more watching several movies in which things go absolutely glacially paced to reach an area that you pretty much already figured out at the beginning. And it's without ridiculous love triangles thrown in. I'm sorry for going on this ridiculous rant, but I've just seen so many people talk about the movie of it's the best thing ever and so politically wonderful and so great, and how much they love the series when something already exists that did it much better fairly recently, both in print and on film. And I want people to write it, so please tell me in the comments what you thought of the series, if the books get better after the first one. I've only read the first book of the series. If the movies get better after the first one, what you thought of The Running Man or Battle Royale and how they compare to these other ones. If you're interested in seeing some of the older versions of this story, like The Millionaire's Game from the 1970s, do you like The Running Man as I do, despite all of its flaws? Or do you just think it's a terrible, ridiculous movie and you like the super serious, dour Katniss Everdeen a little bit better? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content. I will be reviewing more movies, TV shows, and video games in the future. Please like this video if you liked it, and my name is Mike, and have a good night.